We are continuing on
Here's Grumpy Gwen.
with the Mystery of History, Volume 1. We're at Lesson 11, Early Egypt. It is a long one, so we'll probably have a shorter science lesson today. Eleanor is here participating with us. She's quite happy today. Right, Ella? You feeling a lot better today?
Mommy forgot.
Yeah?
Are we gonna still do the blue book?
Yep, we got to print off yesterday's and today's. But Mommy's feeling a lot better today, so I should be able to get it done when we're done with this. The readings. All right. Don't whack your head. Hi. All right, here we go. When you think about...
The book. Can I look at this page you're reading?
Yes, of course. You can come sit with me. When you think about ancient Egypt, you probably picture pyramids and mummies and mysterious things like that. It is hard to imagine Egypt without those eerie phenomena. But of course, there was something going on in Egypt before the pyramids were ever built. We'll peek into the part of history today. Then we'll look at why the giant pyramids were erected to begin with, and what the pharaohs practiced to present themselves for the afterlife. Ella, did you want to say hello? I'm sorry. Eleanor's saying hello. All right. In the days of early Egypt, the land was divided between what they called Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Did you know that, Eleanor?
No. Did you hear me say hello?
I did. If you looked at a map of Egypt right now, it would help you understand. The upper area of Egypt was actually far down south in Egypt along the Nile River. The area of Egypt was north where the Nile spills into the Mediterranean Sea. Oops. The lower area...
Can I do this looking at the Nile?
Yes, you just need to quiet. The lower area of Egypt was north where the Nile piles into the Mediterranean Sea, so it was reversed. The Nile, by the way, is the longest river in the world. It flows for more than 4,000 miles.
I wish we had a lot of kids that could play all of these cards, because then I could be very happy, because then we could have a lot of cards.
Yes, but right now we're reading about history. I understand why you want kids to play with the cards then. I'm sorry, we don't have them, but right now we need to focus on what we're reading about.
I really want one more sister.
You want another sister?
Yeah, like the one with a baby.
Now, from our perspective, the names of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt are in the wrong place. Why? We would probably think of north as being upper and south as being lower. But you know what? The Egyptians weren't looking at the area from a map. They were describing the makeup of their land. The upper area of Egypt is where the land was higher. That's interesting. I did not learn that the last time I learned about this. And the lower end, the land was closer to the sea level. This is also why the Nile appears to run up when we look at it from a map. It runs from the high plains of central Egypt to the low-lying lands of the sea. But as for Upper and Lower Egypt, culturally they were very different. The upper Egyptians were very artistic and grew grain. Their symbol was that of a sedge plant, and they worshipped a vulture goddess. The lower Egyptians were good with tools and building. They had the symbols of a bee and worshipped the cobra goddess. Most historians think that a king named Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt. Others think it was Narmer, or that Menes and Narmer were the same person. Winnie, I cannot see if your hand is on there. Still, others think it was a ruler named Hor-Aha who united the two kingdoms. Yes. All to say it is unclear from ancient records who united Upper and Lower Egypt and when this event occurred, but it was very significant. As a result, ancient Egyptians grew strong and prosperous. The ruler of the United Kingdom built a capital city at Memphis. Ella, I don't want to have to shout over you. Where he could oversee his large nation. It had been estimated that it took 2 weeks in a boat for the king to visit both ends of his kingdom. Fortunately, calendars and hieroglyphs had been created by then to help with communication. Hieroglyphs are figures and objects that form picture words. The Egyptians had over 2,000 characters in their hieroglyphic alphabet. Yes, very cool. Now let's look at the fascinating structure of pyramids, which were actually tombs or burial chambers for the pharaohs of Egypt. In the earliest days of Egypt, kings were buried under piles of rocks. These piles of rocks grew into more sophisticated structures called mastabas. These evolved into step pyramids when a chief minister named Imhotep built a 6-layer mastaba for his pharaoh. It was the first of 80 pyramids to transform the landscape of Egypt. Have you heard of the Great Pyramid of Giza? It is the tallest.
I think I hear it.
You think you've heard of it? It is the tallest and oldest of the 3 enormous pyramids built in Giza, a town near the city of Cairo. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built for Pharaoh Khufu. Were he alive today, he would be proud to know that his pyramid made it into the list of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and is the only ancient wonder to still be standing. Khufu, or possibly one of his sons, was also the architect of the Great Sphinx, an enormous statue of a lion with the head of a man that stands near the Great Pyramid of Giza. I said you could. Unfortunately, over time, the nose and the beard of the man have been destroyed, but the statue as a whole remains the largest monolith in the world, standing 65 feet high and 241 feet long. This is a picture of Edward. This is a picture of the early Egyptians' hieroglyphic alphabet, right here.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and then here are some pictures of the pyramids, so you know what we're talking about. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the tallest of 3 enormous pyramids built near Cairo in Egypt. Okay. The size of the pyramids is even more staggering. Picture the base of them one stretching as far as 10 football fields and being as tall as a 40-story building. They would be much taller than the Statue of Liberty, but not as tall as the Eiffel Tower. How heavy are these structures? Edward, that's a little bit loud. We don't know for sure, but an average stone could weigh 2.5 tons. Some were larger and weighed up to 15 tons, or the equivalent of 5 elephants. Could you imagine building something that weighed as much as 5 elephants? Just that one part of it?
How do you imagine? How do you imagine?
You think about it.
You think about it?
Yeah. More than 80 pyramids still stand today. Most are along the Nile River. Some find it a mystery as to how these huge stones were moved. The Nile River, as well as ramps and lots of manpower, probably helped men transport the raw materials. But by now you are probably already convinced that men were pretty smart even a long time ago. Remember Jubal and Tubal King? Eleanor, you're being rude. Please don't shout while I'm trying to read. Mama's voice is already going. So why did the kings and queens of Egypt have these huge pyramids built? They did it in part because of their misunderstanding of life and death. The pharaohs of that day believed that they needed to preserve themselves as best as possible at death in order to experience an afterlife. Like the Sumerians, they also took their important possessions with them, which sometimes included slaves or other people. Some mummified their favorite pets. Since the pyramids were mainly built to serve as tombs, burial chambers were embedded deep inside a resting place for the dead. For example, Khufu's burial chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza stands 28 feet high and is lined with polished granite. Steep passages lead to other chambers that were either unfinished or built as decoys. It is not uncommon in the pyramids to find secret passageways, doorways, and false paths designed to confuse tomb robbers and thieves. Nonetheless, even with all the twists and turns of the pyramid, it was hard to keep thieves out. They were notorious for stealing treasures found deep within the massive structure.
Don't play up here. No, I'm not.
Guys, when Edward, she's gonna play with it. That's the way she is.
I'm gonna drive away.
You're gonna be polite. So in the later dynasty of Egypt, pharaohs chose. Guys, quiet. Pharaohs chose to be buried in caves on the west side of the Nile River, opposite the city of Thebes. We call this area the Valley of the Kings. Unfortunately, all the tombs we know of in the Valley of the Kings were eventually robbed and stripped of treasure too. This is except the tomb of King Tut. We'll learn more about that later. Let's consider now the making of mummies. The way the kings and queens were preserved was through a method called mummification. The process was long and somewhat gruesome to perform. Once a person died, his or her internal organs were removed. At least 4 organs, the liver, the stomach, the lungs, and the intestines, were preserved in special urns called canopic jars. In later dynasties, the lids of these jars were decorated with the heads of Egyptian gods who could supposedly guard the organs of the mummy through the afterlife. Strangely, the Egyptians... Sure. No, you don't draw in your school book. Strangely, the Egyptians threw out the brain because they thought the heart did all the thinking. The heart was left in the body. After the bodies dried out, they were embalmed or filled with special resin and oil. Last, the bodies were carefully wrapped with linen cloth and sealed in elaborate coffins. The priests and embalmers took the jobs very seriously and shaved their heads for cleanliness. Perhaps their sense of duty was from respect for their dead king or queen, or from fear of the afterlife for themselves. Regardless, these ancient practices have given us fabulous pictures of the life of the ancient Egyptians. Their magnificent treasures tell us a lot about their beliefs and their way of life. We will study more about the ancient Egyptians through the living of Amenhotep, Nefertiti, King Tut, and Ramses. They are all quite fascinating because of the ancient historian Herodotus wrote that they did everything differently from everyone else. All right, that was a long lesson for history. Yeah, twice as long as usual. But we are done now. Can you guys say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Queenie, can you say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Ellie, you want to say goodbye?